Advanced Management Technology Incorporated. We go by AMTI for short. We are an IT services company working primarily for the federal government. It's interesting, we looked at BPM from two aspects. We originally looked at it from an internal perspective as a user of BPM, and we've also looked at it for what we can do for our customers with BPM. The primary focus for us from an internal perspective is that we were in a high growth phase, and what we were trying to do was we were trying to grow the company, and we were trying to be able to provide increased services for that growth, to maintain that growth from an administrative perspective, but we didn't want to increase staff. And so our primary focus was to enable ourselves to grow, okay, without increased staff. And with BPM, we were able to do that. The big thing that we were looking for originally was just the capability to really quickly and easily build processes. As an IT services company, we know how to build software. We know how to do Java programming and .NET and ASP and all those kind of things. But those methodologies were just too slow. They really were not enabling technologies for us in terms of being able to automate processes and go forward. So we needed something that would allow us to build those things quickly. And the other thing is to do it with a minimum number of staff. Our IT organization at AMTI, I didn't say it originally, we're about 380 people, about $85 million a year, but our IT organization is 5 people. 2 people on the software custom process side and 2 people on the network support side. So those 2 people were the only 2 people that really were the ones that were going to build these things. The 5th person is myself, and you really can't count on a CTO being too productive for anything. So.
Okay.
We had to prove the capability to my CEO. I'm the CTO. I report directly to the COO. And what we had to do was we had to demonstrate to him that this was going to be of benefit. And so that's what we ended up doing. It was really a proof to the COO.
Okay.
Our original problem was purchasing. And so the original process that we built was purchase requests. And the way the deal is for us is we buy not only for ourselves, but we buy for our customers. And so when we buy, we have to make certain that all of our purchases are first categorized, segregated appropriately so that they're not mixed up. So we have to be able to make certain that we can go track which ones we bought for the customer and which ones we bought. And then we have to make certain that we have the appropriate approvals, and we have to make certain that we have the appropriate documentation. So it's not just an internal problem that we have to solve. We also have to be able to evidence that information back to DCAA, because if DCAA comes in and audits our purchasing, we have to be able to prove that what we purchased was appropriate, well-defined, that the customer approved it. We have to be able to prove that those things that are allocated as overhead expenses are truly overhead. I mean, it gets really, you can get into a lot of trouble if you can't demonstrate back to DCAA, the auditors for the government, that your purchasing process is correct and that those things that you're purchasing are what you say they are. And so that was a big problem for us. We're a distributed company. We have people in Virginia, we have people in California, we support the supercomputing center out at Ames. We have people out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And so before we did this, all of this was a paper-based process. It was taking us about 2 weeks to get a purchase request through with all the approvals and the back and forth, and when something would be wrong, you have to send it back to them, you'd FedEx it back to them, and all that kind of stuff. And so we had to get all the documentation. That was a big part of it. But the other thing is once we made it electronic, we were able to turn around and consolidate that entire process time for purchasing from a significant number of days to about maybe 4 hours at most. And the way that we measure that time, just for somebody to know, is we measure from the time that the purchase request is submitted until the time the purchase request enters purchasing, so that it's all approved, all the documentation is there, and it's now at the state where it's been ordered. So that's how we measure that. So whatever time it takes to get back from shipping, we don't count that. We were acquired by Tetra Tech Corporation in March of last year, March of 2004. Before we were acquired by Tetra Tech, Sarbanes-Oxley wasn't something that we had to worry about. We were a privately held company. Tetra Tech Corporation is a $1.7 billion a year publicly held company. And once we were part of that, we were now subject to Sarbanes-Oxley. Now, it's kind of interesting. We didn't recognize at first that we were going to be subject to Sarbanes-Oxley. What happened to us is in September of 2004, a little over a year ago from here, we were told by corporate that we were one of 7 units. There's 30 business units that make up Tetra Tech Corporation. We're one of the 7 units that were categorized as what's called full scope. And that meant that we would have to go through a full audit of all of our financial and IT controls. And that would have to be in place by the end of the fiscal year, which was the September 30th of the next year. And so there's 2 aspects of that, obviously. There's the financial side and there's the IT side. We're also going through an ERP rollout at the same time. We did not focus on trying to automate or use eWork to solve financial controls, although we've already got the purchasing system in place, so that was already part of the control basis, but everything was going to change, so there wasn't much point. But we did focus in on the IT side. And so what we did was, since we already know how to do eWork, is we looked at what we needed to be compliant. We looked at what our processes should be. And then we ended up building 2 eWork processes to support that. Actually, one was a modification. We had an IT services capability from before, but we had to modify it to do the additional requirements, primarily account management, access controls, and the approvals, making certain that we had the appropriate approvals. And then we put together a change process so that we could control and evidence appropriate approvals for changes to significant applications. And so those are 2 big things for us. It took us probably about 3 months to get all that change in place. But at the end of the year, when we got the audits, we were the highest rated of the 7 business units that were full scope business units that went through the Sarbanes-Oxley process at Tetra Tech. I think we haven't been as disciplined as we should be. So we actually have gone back and looked at some of the numbers and some of the, like for instance, the performance that we get for the purchasing. The biggest thing that we look for from a process perspective, my boss likes to say, he says, first thing we want to do is we want to be effective. The second thing we want to do is we want to be efficient. So the first thing we're really concerned with are we doing the right processes? And so it's more originally about what processes do we need to do? Do we need to be compliant? We recently put together an employment requisition process. We identified that as an area where we weren't communicating well with all of the business units in terms of what was going on within HR and what was going on in the programs in terms of being efficient, or effective, I should say, in terms of how we were doing that. And so we identified that as a process that we needed. We've put that process in place. Now what we'll worry about how well that process is actually satisfying those individuals. And so our ultimate measure is really, for us, is really whether or not we've satisfied that original problem and whether or not our users think that that's an effective and efficient solution for that problem. We have some really big initiatives planned for this next year. We are going through an ISO compliance situation right now where we're trying to become certified. We're going through a CMMI evaluation. We are looking at establishing a PMO. We are very process oriented in terms of how we're looking at things, and we're becoming very strategic in how we're trying to figure out how to apply process to the company. So I'd say this next year will be very important for us in terms of how we start to look at process and how we apply process through the company in a much more disciplined fashion than we have in the past, much more structured approach than we've taken in the past. And certainly BPM will become a major aspect of that in terms of which processes we identify that we want to automate as we go through and define how we want our process structure to look.